You are looking right now at a Cygnus spacecraft at the end of the robotic arm right outside the International Space Station, just minutes away from its departure and the end of Northrop Grumman's 12th resupply mission. A very good morning from Mission Control Houston, and welcome to our live coverage as we get ready to say farewell to the SS Allen Bean, which has been attached to the station for about 3 months and is currently packed full of about 5,800 pounds of cargo and other items for disposal in the Earth's atmosphere. Its mission's not done after this departure, but again, we are just about 20 minutes away. We're coming to you live from here in Mission Control Houston, where the Orbit 1 team's still on console. They've been monitoring all the systems overnight and getting this spacecraft ready for its departure. A couple of the people you're going to see in the room today leading the team right now is Flight Director Rick LeBrode. He's standing up there talking to some folks behind him. And a voice you're going to hear quite a bit is the gentleman in the blue shirt right in the center there. That's Steven Zenter. He's the Capcom this morning. You're going to be hearing him talking to the crew on board the International Space Station, one of which is standing by at a robotics workstation ready to get this Cygnus spacecraft underway. There are currently 6 crew members on board the International Space Station. One of them, Drew Morgan, a NASA astronaut, is standing by. He's going to be monitoring Cygnus during this departure operation today, and he's actually going to be commanding the departure of the vehicle once it's released from the robotic arm. This view right here is actually looking right at his robotics workstation. This is one of the displays he's going to be using to monitor Cygnus after it's released and departs the area around the station. Our release window opens today at 8:30 a.m. Central, and we are tracking a release today at 8:35 a.m. Central, 9:35 a.m. Eastern. It'll be a pretty quick operation today. Once you see Cygnus get released from the robotic arm, it'll slowly start to back away. Once it reaches a distance of about 4.5 meters, the crew member, Drew Morgan, is going to give the departure command, actually sending Cygnus away. It's going to do a quick departure burn lasting for about 3 minutes, and that will begin to take it out of the neighborhood away from the International Space Station and eventually moving out a couple of different checkpoints that we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes, and eventually flying away from the station, setting it up for its secondary mission.
A little bit, and main goal here is we got to get through SSRMS back away after release to start any exercise, but we think we'll be able to support the Max Sivas session about 20 to 30 minutes early.
Copy that. I'll be ready. Thank you.
And just now you heard Capcom Steven Zenter talking to Jessica Meir, another NASA astronaut currently on board the station. Whenever they're doing these visiting vehicle operations, or particularly whenever they're doing anything with the large robotic arm, which we're getting a really cool view here, you can see that Canadarm2. It's about a 57-foot long robotic arm used to grapple visiting spacecraft, also used for a lot of spacewalks, and was used over the years to physically build the space station itself. But they put in what's known as exercise constraints, even though a lot of the different exercise devices on the space station, like the treadmill or the weightlifting device known as the ARED, have a lot of vibration isolation built into them. They can still transmit what we call loads, so that excess vibration through the other systems, and just to make sure that you're not impacting the actual departure or the release of the spacecraft, they don't allow the crew to exercise during very specific times. But they build all this into the timeline, and they'll have plenty of time to complete their exercise, each of them doing about 2 hours every single day on board the station. But back to today's operations again, the release window itself is going to open up at 8:30, so in just about 11 minutes from now. Today's release is going to be ground commanded, so while Drew Morgan's on board the International Space Station right now monitoring Cygnus and the arm, ground controllers here in Houston will actually send the command remotely from Mission Control to the robotic arm to release Cygnus. It has a series of snares that will open up, and then the vehicle will be in what's known as kind of a free drift, where its thrusters are inhibited, and then the robotic arm will slowly back away from the spacecraft, and then again, once it's at about 4.5 meters away, Drew Morgan gets the go to actually command Cygnus to begin departing. and you're seeing things start to brighten up right now. We are in an orbital sunrise, so the sun now beginning to dawn on station and Cygnus today. If you're familiar with station, you know it's traveling at about 17,500 miles per hour, and these crews on board seeing about 16 sunrises and sunsets every single day. The vehicle, again, has been attached to station for just about 88 days. We actually just passed into the 90th day of Cygnus's mission, 90 days since it launched on November 2nd, 2019. It arrived at the station just 2 days later, where it was grappled out of the air by the Expedition 61 crew and was attached to the space station. It's been attached to the Earth-facing port of the Unity module, also known as Node 1, for roughly the last 3 months. It originally brought up about 8,200 pounds of cargo to the International Space Station. A lot of that split across different categories, including crew supplies, so things like food, water, clothing, any other disposable items for the crew. The lion's share of cargo on this mission was science investigations. It delivered over 4,300 pounds of research samples, hardware, and other pieces to support dozens of different science experiments on board the International Space Station. Also delivered some spacewalk equipment. A lot of that was really important for the AMS repair EVAs. So those were spacewalks to repair something known as the alpha magnetic spectrometer. It had had issues with its cooling loops, and they actually went out and installed an entire box cut into the experiment itself and did something called swaging, so cutting and splicing metal tubes that circulate carbon dioxide throughout the system to help cool it. It's a particle physics experiment that's been on board the space station since 2011 and is searching for signs of antimatter and dark matter, really looking to help explain the origins of our universe. That was done in 4 spacewalks. The 4th one was just wrapped up about a week ago, and everything through the checkouts, they've been able to bring the device back online, the new cooling system performing better than the original one when it was brand new, and science already resuming on the alpha magnetic spectrometer. So Cygnus delivered some equipment that was vital for those spacewalks, and along with that, some different vehicle hardware. These resupply missions able to bring up large spare items for the space station if they're required. Since Cygnus is a vehicle that berths to the International Space Station, it's able to attach to what's known as a common berthing mechanism. If you've ever seen views inside the station, those are the large square entryways and exit points on each of the modules. They're the largest ports available for any vehicle to attach to the International Space Station, so larger than the docking ports, so able to fly large items on these cargo missions that are then able to get brought in. Even rack size, so about telephone booth sized items, can be flown on board Cygnus and delivered to the station itself. For today's departure, though, it's got about 5,800 pounds of items packed into the spacecraft. Cygnus does do what's known as a destructive reentry, so once it departs, it's going to have a secondary mission to deploy a number of different satellites, and then once its time in orbit is ended, flight controllers in Dulles, Virginia will command Cygnus to do a number of burns that will eventually bring it back through the Earth's atmosphere, and as it doesn't have a heat shield or any other protective component on board, it will disintegrate, so we're able to pack a lot of the trash from onboard station, other items that are just ready for disposal, onto vehicles like Cygnus to be incinerated in the Earth's atmosphere. The station is a closed system, so any trash you generate has to go somewhere, or you would eventually just be living amongst it on board. So vehicles like Cygnus doing a vital role, not only bringing cargo to the International Space Station, but clearing up room on board so more can take its place. And as talked about, Cygnus is going to have a secondary mission following this departure. So after it flies away from the space station today, it'll take about 24 hours, and then it's going to execute a number of deployments of small satellites called CubeSats. Those will be happening a little bit later today and on Saturday. It has two different deployers on board, one a NanoRacks CubeSat deployer, another one known as a Slingshot, or from COPS. And it has a number of different satellites that it will be deploying. From that NanoRacks one, there are 4 in particular that are going to be making their way out. 2 of them are known as Aero Cubes. It's Aero Cube 14A, 14B, and 15A, 15B. Those are going to be looking at CubeSats are a fairly small and inexpensive way to test a lot of different technologies on small satellites in low Earth orbit. The AeroCube 14 is going to be testing some new star tracker technology and a couple of new nanotechnology materials and advanced solar cells in that low Earth orbit environment. 15 going to be demonstrating the rapid development of small size optical sensors in low Earth orbit. It'll have an actual custom designed telescope on board to take photos of the Earth, but it's also going to be operating on a commercially available camera core. Another satellite that's going to be deployed from Cygnus is called the HuskySat-1. It was built by the University of Washington in Seattle, and it's going to be a precursor for a larger satellite that's planned for the future. It's going to be demonstrating some onboard plasma propulsion and also a high-gain telemetry antenna in low Earth orbit. Again, this one's going to be a precursor. They're planning to develop a larger satellite that will be designed for orbital insertion around our moon, which everybody is focused on right now, NASA especially, with the Artemis missions looking to return us to the moon, sending the first woman and the next man by 2024. And the fourth and final CubeSat out of that NanoRacks deployer is going to be SwampSat-2, built by the University of Florida in Gainesville. And that's going to be testing a boom and antenna spooling and deployment mechanism, just looking at a very low frequency antenna just to test some of that communications equipment in low Earth orbit in space. Again, these CubeSats providing a relatively inexpensive and small platform to test a lot of different technologies, whether optical cameras, different propulsion methods and solar cells, and also communications tools. And so Cygnus is going to be deploying those. It'll also have a number that it will deploy on Saturday from something called the Slingshot. About 7 different satellites planned to deploy on that one. So Cygnus able to execute a number of items even after its resupply mission to the International Space Station is completed. This Cygnus in particular does not have one, but one of the upcoming ones will, where they'll do experiments inside the Cygnus capsule itself following its departure. One of the ones that we've seen a number of times is called Sapphire, where they actually intentionally start a small fire contained inside the Cygnus spacecraft and look at how it propagates or how it spreads, and then they're able to study how you could actually fight and suppress these fires inside of spacecraft. Again, spacecraft like the International Space Station, it's a closed system, so things like fire are one of the concerns that you train for and monitor extremely heavily, looking at any materials that fly up for flammability, things like that.
On 2 for Jessica and timeline.
Go ahead.
Yep, we're about to get started with our release op, so we wanted to give you the information. Conditions are met for you to pick up with the EMU loop scrub deconfig. We do have a procedure delta. Drew saw a fault indication on the PSA earlier that we'd like to try and clear. So after step 189, when you power the PSA off, we'd like you to repower the PSA, let the startup sequence complete, and then verify that the fault LED is off and the status rows are blank. We can get a status from you once we're through with Cygnus release.
Okay, copy. So after 189, I'm going to repower the PSA and then wait for the power up to complete and then just look at any statuses. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then from there, you'll go to power it back off and press with the procedure.
Okay, copy all. I'm going to get that started in just a couple minutes.
Sounds good. And another awareness item, Drew saw a drop of water on selector valve on 3004. So you can let us know, again, later on in a report if you see anything off nominal.
Okay, and where was the drop of water?
It was on the selector valve.
And just there, you heard some words between Steven Zenter, the Capcom for today here in Mission Control Houston, and Jessica Meir, the NASA astronaut on board. She's doing something called an EMU loop scrub. And an EMU is the extravehicular mobility unit. Those are the large white spacesuits the crew members use on the U.S. side for spacewalks. We are just 6 days removed from a spacewalk on board the final AMS, the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer Repair one. And as is typical following those, they do a number of different maintenance tasks on the suits before they pack them away for long-term storage. This loop scrub running through all the different cooling and feed loops for the different fluids inside the suit. So Jessica Meir are going to be executing that for about the next 30 minutes or so. She's already been working on that from earlier this morning. We have done 3 spacewalks, Meir herself doing 2 of those along with Christina Cook, the 3rd NASA astronaut on board, to go outside and swap out some batteries on the space station, the large external batteries that store electrical power from the solar arrays for use while the station itself is on the dark side of the planet. And then again, that 3rd AMS spacewalk did take place just about 6 days ago on January 25th. For now, though, we are 4 minutes away, actually about 3 minutes away now from the planned release of Cygnus.
Houston on 2 for Drew and Cygnus.
Attempt 2.
We are go for Cygnus departure on time for form step 3 and 4 in 1.602, Cygnus release and departure monitoring.
Copy.
And there you heard at the ground reporting there go the flight director Rick LeBrode a little while ago doing a go no-go poll of all the different teams, also checking in with the Cygnus flight control team from Northrop Grumman out in Virginia. They're going to be in charge of the vehicle after its departure from the station. Drew Morgan's the one who's actually going to send the command to send Cygnus away after the release command has been given by a robotics controller here on the ground. Again, we're tracking that to come at 8:35 a.m. Central Time, 9:35 a.m. Eastern. We'll have a number of different views available. This one of that robotics workstation. The end of the robotic arm itself has a camera that looks right at the Cygnus spacecraft, and we'll be able to get a close-up view of it as it flies away from the station's arm. Yeah, there you go. This looking right down the barrel of what's known as the lead, the latching end effector. It's got a number of snares inside that will release the Cygnus spacecraft, and then you'll see it slowly start to move away. It'll be in free drift, and then they'll back the arm away.
ISS thrusters inhibited, and ground M1 is go for release on time.
Copy.
And another good sign there, we are go for release on time. So we should be just about a minute away from that release. We'll listen in and give you the official time as soon as Cygnus is flying free. We'll see it begin to depart the area around the International Space Station after the arm is backed away about 4.5 meters. It'll be flying away. We'll stick with it until it's outside of what's known as the keep out sphere and the approach ellipsoid. We'll give you a rundown of those as we get a little bit closer. But for now, we're about 30 seconds away from release.
Station Houston on 2, proceeding with release. Release commanded.
Copy.
There you have it. The release has been commanded. So at this point, snares beginning to roll back and release Cygnus.
Snares open. Begin monitoring for drift out.
Copy.
And with the snares now open, Cygnus has been released. Coming at 8:36 a.m. Central Time, 9:36 a.m. Eastern Time. So the station was flying 268 statute miles over the South Pacific, just off the west coast of Chile. And now you can see Cygnus slowly starting to float away from the grasp of that robotic arm. They're going to begin backing the arm away until it's about 4.5 meters away, and then it'll be over to Drew Morgan to command Cygnus to depart. And you'll see the capture point on Cygnus come into view. That's where the robotic arm's latching end effector, essentially the hand of the device, latches onto when capturing the vehicle.
Station on 2, pin has exited delay.
Copy, Drew. Proceeding with back away.
And now that Drew Morgan has reported the pin, so the central portion of that capture device has exited the robotic arm itself. The ground controllers here in Houston now backing the arm away. Drew Morgan standing by and looking at a number of different displays. Once he sees the back away at a distance of about 4.5 meters, he'll be go to command Cygnus to depart.
Back away in progress.
Copy.
And Cygnus still in free drift, seeming to just hang there in the air. The robotic arm slowly backing away. Again, we're looking for a distance of about 4.5 meters away. Then we'll see Cygnus start to fire its engines and fly away from the station. The departure burn will last for about 3 minutes. That'll begin sending Cygnus away. Its first gate that it'll depart through is what's known as the keep out sphere.
Station on 2, arm the vehicle clearance approximately 1.5 meters.
Houston copies.
Arm about 1.5 meters away, so about 3 meters to go. The arm continuing to back away. Again, we're looking for a distance of about 4.5 meters. For now, Cygnus still in free drift. Once we hit that distance, Drew Morgan will send the command to begin the departure burn and send Cygnus away from the station.
Houston Station on 2, Cygnus depart commanded and confirmed.
We copy, see the same, and back away is complete.
And the departure burn has begun. Again, this expected to last about 3 minutes.
Cygnus departure burn is in progress. Monitor departure burn, step 5 and 1.602.
Copy.
And now so we've got about 2 minutes left in this departure burn. You can see Cygnus flying away from the station now. The next major call we're going to be looking out for is when Cygnus has exited the keep out sphere. The keep out sphere is an imaginary sphere with about 200 meters in radius all around the International Space Station. It's one of a number of checkpoints that visiting vehicles pass through when they're coming and going from the orbiting laboratory. As long as you are outside of the keep out sphere, you need to be sure that you are what's called abort fail tolerant for at least 4 orbits around the Earth. So what that means is once you're outside that keep out sphere, and as long as you are outside, you have to be sure that your spacecraft is in a trajectory that for at least 4 orbits around the Earth, or about 6 hours, you're not going to move back inside of that keep out sphere. Obviously very important on the way up. And they do a number of checkouts on vehicles as they're approaching the station just to make sure everything is fine before they pass through that and are no longer that 4 orbit safe. So for now, it's going to continue to fly away, and we'll keep an ear out for once it's outside the keep out sphere. That'll be the first of 2 major checkpoints it's going to pass through today. The second will be the approach ellipsoid. That's a little bit more different of a shape. It has a shape of about 4 kilometers by 2 by 2. It's ellipsoid around the International Space Station, and that one is a lot of the same rules as the keep out sphere, but it's just a little more strict, where that one's 24 hours safe. So a vehicle has to be on a free or a trajectory where for at least 24 hours it would not be moving inside of that approach ellipsoid. That is expected to take about 20 minutes after this departure burn. So we'll continue to follow along and should hopefully get good views of Cygnus as it exits the neighborhood around the station and gets ready for its secondary mission.
Station Houston on 2, Cygnus departure burn complete. Perform step 6 and 1.602.
Copy, step 6. Stephen, crew would just like to say farewell to the SS Alan Bean, and thank you to the entire Cygnus NG-12 team for making Expedition 61 highly successful.
And Drew Morgan offering some words on behalf of the Expedition 61 crew, saying farewell to the SS Alan Bean, this spacecraft executing Northrop Grumman's 12th resupply mission to the International Space Station was named after the Apollo astronaut. Alan Bean flew to the moon on Apollo 12 and became the 4th human to walk on the lunar surface. And this spacecraft, named in his honor, delivered over 8,200 pounds of supplies, experiments, and hardware to the International Space Station. Now flying free after that release, which came at 8:36 a.m. Central.
Cygnus has exited the 200-meter keep-out sphere.
Copy.
And there we have confirmation that Cygnus is now outside of that keep-out sphere. So again, right now, if we were to completely lose contact and control of Cygnus, it's in a trajectory where it would not move back inside of that keep-out sphere for at least 4 orbits of planet Earth. Our next milestone coming up is once we're outside of the approach ellipsoid, which largely the same basic concept, except instead of just 4 orbits, it'll be outside for at least 24 hours. Again, Cygnus's mission isn't over, though. It's going to remain in orbit until the end of February, actually scheduled to come home on February 29th. It does have a secondary mission of deploying a number of small satellites to test different technologies, things like cameras, antennas, different communications technologies, solar cells, a number of different materials in that low Earth orbit environment. And so it's going to be deploying a number of these different CubeSats. Some of those will go out a little bit later today, this afternoon and evening, and then another batch will go out on Saturday. And while this mission may be at an end for the International Space Station crew, the next Cygnus is already prepped and waiting to arrive. In just a couple of weeks, the CRS-13 mission from Northrop Grumman set to launch on Sunday, February 9th from the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia on an Antares rocket. That launch right now is scheduled for 4:39 p.m. Central Time, 5:39 p.m. Eastern Time, again on Sunday, February 9th. That vehicle will also spend a couple of days traveling up to the International Space Station and is slated to deliver about another 8,000 pounds of cargo to the International Space Station. While it's on its way, though, this Cygnus will still be flying around planet Earth, so the Northrop Grumman team doing what's known as dual Cygnus ops. They'll be controlling 2 spacecraft at the same time. CRS-12, the SS Alan Bean should largely just be orbiting and not getting any commands really until the 29th of February when it gets ready to deorbit. But in the meantime, that CRS-13 mission, that Cygnus dubbed the SS Robert Lawrence, after the first African-American astronaut selected to an astronaut program, is going to be making its way to the station in just a couple of weeks. For now, though, everything going real smoothly with this op.
I just wanted to check in, see if there were any cleanup steps that you needed from me here in the cupola.
And Drew, negative. There are no cleanup steps required for you at the workstation.
Copy.
And with that call, Drew Morgan's job with Cygnus for the day has completed. His very last one you heard called Step 6. That was just verifying that the departure burn had been completed, which it was. Cygnus now flying free. Right now, it's about 600 meters away from the International Space Station. Again, we're just waiting for it now to get outside of what's known as the approach ellipsoid. That's a 2 by 2 by 4 kilometer shape around the station. Again, just governs some of the rules for visiting vehicles flying to and from the laboratory. And then once it's outside there, it'll be in a 24-hour safe drift trajectory.
Going to Jessica.
Yeah, so on the PSA after 189, I did turn it back on, and there are no faults, no other signature. Did you want me to also turn the suit select back to EMU 1 and 2, or just the main power?
Negative, Jessica. What you did was just what we needed. You are go to pick back up in step 189 and power it back off.
Okay, sounds good, will do. And just to report on the water, there was indeed water. I'm assuming that Drew had dried off what was there before. So there was some water on the selector valve on the water processing jumper 1002, which was attached to EMU 3004. And it was just a few mils, not a large amount, and it was all at the base of the selector valve between right where it attaches, near where it attaches to the metal fitting. So it does seem like there's a leak coming from there. There is no water anywhere else, so I can't imagine that it would have come from anywhere else, especially if Drew had wiped away what was there earlier.
All right, Jessica, we appreciate the report, understand all, and you're go to proceed with the rest of the procedure.
Okay, and I did take some pictures of it for you, so I will send those down as well when I'm finished.
Excellent. You know we like pictures.
Almost as much as serial numbers.
And you're hearing some additional discussions between the Capcom Steven Zenter and a flight engineer on board, Jessica Meir, one of the 3 NASA astronauts currently residing on the space station. She's doing some routine maintenance through the EMUs, the large white spacesuits used for spacewalks on the U.S. side of the station. They're getting this after completing 3 spacewalks this month, 2 to swap out batteries, and then 1 to finish repairing the alpha magnetic spectrometer. For the crew, they're about 2/3 of the way through their day. For Drew Morgan, it's going to be over to some exercise and a couple packing items for some experiments. Jessica Meir about to go off and work on some surface sampling for their environmental health system. The astronauts routinely taking samples from air ducts and different surfaces around the station just to make sure they're living in a clean and safe environment. Right now, Christina Cook is doing what's known as crew departure prep, as she's actually getting ready to come home in just about a week from now. Cook's going to be returning after spending more time in space in a single mission than any other woman in history, and is set to return on Thursday, February 6th. She's going to be coming home with the current station commander, Luca Parmitano from ESA, the European Space Agency, and Alexander Skvortsov of Roscosmos. Meanwhile, we're still tracking Cygnus about 940 meters away from the station at this point. And we're just standing by for just a couple more minutes until it's outside of the approach ellipsoid.
Control Station, look on 2.
Huntsville is with you on 2. Are you ready to get started with your vascular echo activity?
Absolutely, ready to go.
All right, we are still working on our enablement. I will let you know when Danielle is available, but she will be using private space to ground 3. But I can give you a go in 3.1, and so you can get started.
Thank you. Copy, Danielle will be on 3.
Houston Station on 2 for Max Davis.
Go ahead, Christina.
Just checking to see if the party was available on another space to ground.
Yep, we're getting everything finalized. It'll take just one more minute to confirm. While I have you, did you hear a click when you power cycled the PWD? The reason we're asking is it would help us understand the state of the valves prior to your power cycle.
I do not remember hearing a click, but I also can't 100% confirm that there was not a click.
Okay, I obviously meant PMD. I just wrote it down wrong. Copy, you didn't hear any audible clicks.
Not one that I remember.
All right, Christina, thanks for the information, and just stand by for 1 or 2 more minutes, and we'll get you set up for Max Davis.
Please.
Station Huntsville on space to ground 2 for Luca.
Item 2.
Yes, Luca, just letting you know that Danielle is now available for you on space to ground 3 when you need her.
I still don't have the views on the monitors for VCA1 and VCA2, and I'll continue working step 4, and then I'll call Danielle on 3.
We copy.
Station Houston on 2 for Christina.
And again, we're just standing by. We should hear that call that Cygnus is now outside of the approach ellipsoid momentarily.
Stephen, I can pass a message to Christina.
Yeah, if you'll let her know that Space to Ground 4 is private, and we are ready for her max Cevis activity.
Okay, copy. I'll pass it along.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Cygnus has exited the approach ellipsoid.
All right, and there you heard the call from Capcom. Cygnus now outside of the approach ellipsoid. So it's a little more than 1,000 meters away from the International Space Station at this point. All this coming following a departure, that release coming at 8:36 a.m. Central Time, 9:36 a.m. Eastern Time. Well, the station was flying just over the South Pacific off the west coast of Chile. Now Cygnus will continue on its secondary mission coming up a little bit later this evening, starting off with the deployment of a number of satellites and continuing into Saturday. Cygnus is going to remain in orbit until the end of February. It'll eventually deorbit and burn up upon re-entry on Saturday, February 29th. That'll bring an end to the 12th resupply mission for Northrop Grumman and the Cygnus spacecraft, the SS Alan Bean. I do want to thank you for tuning in this morning. A lot more exciting stuff coming up, including another Cygnus launching on February 9th, but most importantly, a crew coming home just next week on Thursday, February 6th. So tune in then to watch Christina Koch return after 328 days in space, setting the record for the longest single space flight ever by a female astronaut. With that, though, we will wrap up our coverage for today. This is Mission Control Houston.